So last Sunday, I was in Missouri leading racial justice, courage for racial justice workshops for mostly white faith activists in Missouri. And I woke up Sunday morning and I was supposed to be giving 2 sermons that day, and I had lost my voice. And so for the last 6 days, I've been trying to get my voice back. And so yesterday I was like hardly speaking. And I'd never lost my voice before, and I don't think it's a coincidence that I lost it in Missouri, where the people of Ferguson have opened up a historic time that we live in. Being in Columbia, Missouri, and hearing white faith activists talk about the impact of the courage, of the risk-taking of black students at the University of Missouri, concerned student 1950, facing death threats on social media, rising from a legacy of black liberation student activism, Ferguson rising from a legacy of working class black community resistance to supremacy systems in this country. So I don't think it was a coincidence that I lost my voice being in this space and hearing people talk about their experiences of being in Missouri as white people trying to come up against white supremacy and joining, following, connecting to black leadership in Missouri. But I also knew that this was a spiritual journey of 6 days to get to this place. Revolutionary love in a multi-faith space, because as a kid, I always spoke with God. I'd leave God cookies when I'd go on vacation, say, take care of my toys. When I was about 15 and coming into activism, I said, okay, God, I'm trying to figure out my politics. When I'm 30, I'll figure out my spirituality, but I love you. I had a moment of trying to just get out of my house, and the only friend I knew who had a car went to I didn't know it at the time, but it was a right-wing evangelical Christian church. And the youth group was pretty hopping. But all of a sudden, I was like, wait, what? We're going to go protest out in front of an abortion clinic and not for pro-choice? And I can either go in the van with everybody else or sit in the dark in the gym? So my first protest was out in front of a Planned Parenthood, standing around a bunch of people with bloody fetus, images, anti-abortion. And I was standing there, and I was 15, and I was like, what am I doing? And faith, particularly the faith that spoke so confidently of God, seemed to be a faith aligned with supremacy systems. And I said, God, I'm confused about my relationship with you. But then I started realizing with the Unitarian Universalists that God can be a sacred, divine force for liberation, and also a complex, messy teacher and lover who just encourages you to stay on the path. And so I knew coming into this space that my voice wasn't just that I was struggling to be able to overcome the mucus-filled body that this poison had gotten all into, but I was struggling to find my voice within a faith community that spoke confidently of the sacred, of the divine, of God as a liberatory force against supremacy systems. When so often I felt like faith communities as a kid and standing in front of that abortion clinic, that faith communities seem so mobilized to support the agenda of supremacy. Are you with me? And so I knew this was a spiritual journey to get my voice, because it's not just that there's a code of white silence in this country about white supremacy. There's also real risks and retaliation when we do speak our voices as leaders of color in majority white denominations. To raise your voice as a black leader, to raise your voice as a leader of color means, will I face the avalanche of white reaction when I speak? Will I have to get a PhD in navigating the emotional realities of progressive white people in order to be able to speak? As a white person, am I not only breaking the code of silence, but am I going to lose friends? Am I going to lose family? Am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to reproduce oppression in the ways that I am horrified to understand and acknowledge, but I probably will. I probably will make mistakes. So raising our voices and finding our voices, and I felt it yesterday as I was listening to voices of faith leaders like Reverend Lewis. My ears were like popping. And I knew it was mucus, but I also knew that it was like my body is trying to get free and get this poison out of me because I want to speak, to join my voice in the chorus of liberation that is here in this space, that is all across this country in these times. And finding voice for me also means finding the capacity to listen. And my ears were popping as I was listening. And I knew that this was a sacred spiritual journey to be in this space with my heart and my soul open. And I had a baptism on the way here. My 8-month-old son peed all over me. I changed clothes. But I felt it. I was on the way here, and I was thinking about being here, and I was like, wow, I feel the warmth. I feel the warmth coming over me. And I thought, good God, we've both been baptized in the piss of humanity. But sometimes revolutionary love means piss and snot. It doesn't just mean embracing the smiles, it means embracing the mess. We are living in a renaissance of black liberation leadership. A renaissance all over this country. Black, queer women, black, trans leaders all over this country, in our denominations, in the streets, and that is creating the headlines, not only because the killing of young black people is not a new phenomenon, it's the resistance that makes it a new reality that's on the front burners. That there is even a commission looking into the police in Chicago. That would not happen if there was not resistance. And then the Chicago report says, oh my gosh, people of color were right. But the reality is that report will have more meaning and legitimacy for a whole lot of white people, a whole lot of middle class people. But the resistance of working class cast out, your voice doesn't matter, your leadership does not matter, your lives does not matter. That leadership, that resistance is what makes these legitimacy reports possible. And then our resistance, our revolutionary love, makes those reports into declarations of change and commitments to revolutionary transformation that must continue. Following that leadership that we are in a renaissance in within our denominations and in the streets. You feel that renaissance? You live in that renaissance? And there's some of you that are that renaissance right here in this room. As a young person coming up, I grew up in a mostly white racist family. Like throughout white society, the most confident white voices on the subject of race were racist. White people, it's often said that white people don't like to talk about race. That ain't true. There's a lot of white people that like to talk about race. The white people who say that they're following the legacy of Dr. King and being colorblind or trying to ignore the conversation or trying to overlook it or saying it's time to move on, the good white people often are the ones that create a dam of possibility to move forward within progressive majority white denominations. Are you with me? It's often the good people that create the road barriers to being able to move forward. Because there are a lot of white people that are looking for opportunities to talk about race. And I grew up in a family where there was a bunch of confident, courageous, in the sense of they just would speak it about race, and they were racist. But my mom said no. She didn't have the media to legitimize her voice. She didn't have the history books to legitimize her position. My grandfather, my uncles, they would speak and spew racist poison, and all of legitimate authority seemed to be behind them. As a kid, I thought, well, maybe my grandpa's right. Maybe it is black women on welfare who are ruining all of the resources in this community. Maybe it is black leaders that are trying to take everything away from white working class families like my family. But my mom said no. That is wrong. She didn't have statistics at her fingertips. She didn't have role models of white anti-racist leaders. She didn't have a chorus of support for her position. But in this avalanche of white, male, racist voices, she would say no. And in that no, it created space for me to find different possibilities. Her no created a yearning for me to find the yes. And the yes was in black liberation struggle, in multiracial democratic movements, and that came later. My friend Terrence, the only black friend I had as a kid. We were teenagers. The Rodney King verdict came out. Los Angeles went up in flames. I'd already been a white progressive anti-racist for 3 years, but I had no concept of what racial justice and anti-racist movement really meant beyond being against the Klan, which is a good place to start. But then Terrence started talking about his experiences of being black in this country, and I was like, Terrence, we have been friends for years, and I had never heard him. Although I looked back, and I was like, oh yeah, he was talking race back then too. But I had never really heard him because I had been trained to not hear the voices of people of color. Being raised white in a white supremacist society means that as a white person, you are raised to literally see a person of color speak and not hear a thing they are saying, not understand anything they are saying. A person of color could speak to a white congregation and say, this is what is going on, this is what is needed, these are the steps that can be taken, and afterwards, 20 white members of that congregation will say, but I just don't know what to do. Or a black leader will speak and put forward a brilliant vision and strategy of what's going on, and 5 white people can't wait to tell that person, here's a better strategy. You with me? Because white people have been trained to not understand and not engage the leadership of people of color, to simultaneously be raised to be illiterate politically and economically to the reality of this country and white supremacy as a foundation for the economy and the political system of this country, to be illiterate, but simultaneously to be told that you are far superior and know it better than anyone else. And so when a black liberation movement explodes around this country, thank God you are ready to tell them all how they're doing it wrong and how they should be doing it differently. You with me? Who wants to get free from this misery? Who wants a different way? Well, my friend Terrence, he didn't just tell me about his experiences as a black person. And it was a spiritual moment. It was a moment when God, when the sacred said, we will open up space for Terrence to speak sacred truths that are not supposed to be spoken. He, as a black man of 18 years old, spoke to a room of about 12 white teenagers, all white, all social justice people. And it was a beautiful thing in retrospect to realize not a single white person argued with him. Not a single white person was in denial. Not a single white person even said, but Terrence, are you exaggerating? Not a single person said, Terrence, I feel so bad now, can you take care of me? Everyone sat and opened up our hearts because the relationship was like sandpaper that was carving us into something beautiful and liberatory. And Terrence was working on us as he shared his own pain. He opened up possibility for a deeper revolutionary love, and we loved Terrence. And so we opened ourselves up. We heard what he said. Weeks after that, I would talk to him about all these black leaders that he had in his house. And I realized I didn't know who any of them were except Dr. King. And I just knew he had some sort of dream that seemed to be a liberal, some sort of liberal reform dream that I rejected. Because because I was radical. I didn't know who Dr. King was. I didn't know who any of these people were. So I kept asking him, who are all these people? And eventually Terrence, his role model, his hero is James Baldwin. And Terrence was like a James Baldwin, fierce, compassionate, poetic. And he came out as gay later too. Terrence said, I'm telling you about who these black leaders are, not so you can know more about me and my people. I'm telling you about I.W. Wells. I'm telling you about Ella Baker. I'm telling you about Langston Hughes. I'm telling you about W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm telling you about Septima Clark, not because I want you to know more about Black History Month, but because I want you to know your leaders too. I want you to know who your leaders are. I want you to connect to the black liberation struggle, which has been stolen from you. One of the ways that white supremacy raises white people is to ignore and not understand and to actually fully misunderstand liberation struggles in communities of color. To fully misunderstand the assumptions, the vision, the strategy, the leadership, the values, the impacts. If you know anything, you know it wrong. And most of what you know, you just don't even know at all. So he said, one of the ways that white supremacy hurts you as a white person, one of the ways that white supremacy negatively impacts white activists. And I was like, wait, what? Racism's a black problem, right? He said one of the ways that racism hurts white people is it raises you to be malnourished of the most important liberation values in liberation history of this country, and it raises you to simultaneously think that you are far superior to everyone else. And so not only are you ignorant, but you are blocked in your growth from your own sense of superiority, and white supremacy is going to devour your heart. We need to liberate our minds as people of color from the colonization of internalized inferiority, as white people from the internalized idea of superiority. And my friend Terrence had revolutionary love. At this time, I had a socialist, white anti-racist socialist friend, Mike. He sat down one day next to a racist skinhead named Sam. Mike said, what is this about? What is this about? The racist skinhead started arguing at first, oh, I'm not really racist. I just believe in white pride. And then that led to, I believe in the division of the races because everyone should just have their own, I believe in Malcolm X, everyone should just have their own space. He actually quoted Malcolm X, the racist skinhead. Malcolm X said we should just, blacks should be here, white should be here, that's the way it should be. Then eventually it was like, the blacks are ruining everything, blah, 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 blah. So my friend Mike, the anti-racist socialist, also white, after listening to the racist skinhead for a while, he eventually started saying, you know what, I want to argue with you. Because our ideas are better, and racism is a poison. And then he started saying, you know what, you and I are both white working class kids. You and I are both white working class teenagers who have experienced the economic humiliations of going to the store and having everyone's eyes judge our moms as they used food stamps to buy us food. We have experienced the humiliations of middle class kids looking down on our secondhand clothes and making us feel like we are secondhand people. We have experienced the economic humiliations of this society of capitalism. We have experienced the humiliations of seeing our aunts and our uncles work 2 jobs and still not be able to put food on the table and feel like they are failures as parents. We have experienced these humiliations as white working class kids, and then racism is given to us as a consolation prize so that we can feel superior to people of color and walk around with our chest puffed out and say, I might not have health care, I might not have housing, but I blame all those undocumented immigrants for taking it away from me. I blame these black women from taking it away from me, and I'm going to puff out my chest and act like this is my world and I am far superior to you all. He said, this is a poison. This is a poison that is deluding you about the realities of what is going on in this country. It is a poison that is leading you away from the possibilities of a truly economic just society, of a multiracial democracy, of actually coming together with the people who you have more in common with and letting a ruling class continue to rule you, all the while you are playing the game that they set up for you to play. You are being played. That racist skinhead kept his hair short, but he changed his politics. He started coming out to anti-police brutality demonstrations when the Rodney King verdict happened. That racist skinhead, now anti-racist socialist, actually his hair's still a little bit longer. He sends me pictures now of his multiracial kids out at Trayvon Martin vigils. He sent me a picture of his multiracial kids, and he says, I'm raising my kids to know about the labor history and their Japanese heritage, to know about the organizing for independence on Hawaii from their Hawaiian ancestry, and I'm raising my kids to know about the abolitionists and the white anti-racists who were part of the civil rights movement so they can understand part of their white ancestry too. I'm raising my kids. And revolutionary love made those kids a reality. The sandpaper of relationships made those kids a reality. When I see those kids would not have existed if it wasn't for courageous white anti-racist voices refusing the silence, refusing the complicity of white supremacy, and speaking out against racism. My anti-racist, socialist, white working class friend Mike, he spoke truth to my formerly racist skinhead friend Sam, and it changed his life and it made a new possibility real. Those kids are the result of revolutionary love. My work is primarily based on trying to support white people to develop the confidence, the courage, the resources, the skills, the emotional, spiritual journey to engage in this work, not as something that must be done so that we can now move on to our faith work. Not something that we can just overcome these divisions so we can move on. But to recognize that this work against supremacy systems is our faith work. This work against supremacy systems is what we are called to do in these times throughout history. Our churches, our faith communities, our purpose as people of faith, people of values of liberation, is to work against supremacy systems, understanding that it is part of our own personal transformation within these structures of oppression and supremacy, our own personal transformation and healing to build relationships, to build congregations, to build faith communities that can be bastions of liberation, but can also be bastions of liberatory power to do damage to supremacy systems, to resist supremacy systems, to turn out when the Black Lives Matter movement says, we are taking to the streets. We are taking to the streets in Chicago, in Tennessee, in Georgia, in New York. We are taking to the streets and the congregations turn out. Are you with me? And so as Mickey was saying, it means that for those of us who are raised white, to start raising ourselves anti-racist, to start raising ourselves as liberation faith people within a multiracial beloved community of possibility. And I say possibility because it is not here to just be a part of. It is in creation all the time when we take risks to join hands and come together and listen to each other, engage with each other. To join in this work as a sacred journey. And so that means going through this process of, I know for myself, when I first became anti-racist and started embracing this work, I hated white people. And leaders of color would say, well, you know, it'd be really great if you could figure out how to organize white people. And I said, I don't want to organize those devils. I hate those devils. I hate white people. And it was an encouragement to, you need to figure out how to love yourself so that you can love your people, so you can love your people to get the white supremacy out of your communities, because the white supremacy in your communities is killing our communities. And we want you all to figure out how to get it together and organize yourselves against these supremacy systems so that we can then join together in the process of building equality, building egalitarian alliances so that we can transform this country. So I said, all right, I'll try to figure that out. So I found Bell Hooks. She has an essay which I encourage everyone to read if you have not read. It's called Love is the Practice of Freedom. Love is the practice of freedom. And in that essay, she talked about the interconnection of systems of oppression, the ways that white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, imperialism come together. And so I was, this white second-generation middle class. My family became middle class through the GI Bill, which Jim Wallace talked about yesterday. So my family, I was first generation becoming middle class in an extended white working class family. But so I was raised white, I was raised middle class. I was straight in the sense of identifying to, let's try to destroy the heterosexist system. I still like to make out with boys. But, straight within that was always sort of okay, let's have a political alliance here. In our political community, it was like, everyone makes out with each other, of course. That was just the norm. And then I went to San Francisco where it was just like, well, everyone's gay on some level. So growing up in that way, I was sort of like, okay, bell hooks, you're talking about the interconnection of oppression. And so for me, it was like, okay, so what does that mean? So people are saying I got to organize white people. Then pretty soon I got told I was a sexist, and I had my mind blown, and I was just like, oh my God, now I got to figure out how to engage men around feminism. And it was like, okay, not only are systems of oppression interconnected, but systems of liberation are also interconnected. Systems of liberation are also interconnected. That doesn't mean that my liberation is means the same thing as what it means for Reverend Lewis and for Mickey, but it means that my liberation is bound up in this process in a way that I am not coming here to say, oh, Mickey, I feel so bad for you. What can I do for you and your people? God, y'all have had it so rough. But to say, I recognize that supremacy systems are a poison and a nightmare within our communities, and they are destroying our ability to join together as divine people, as builders of beloved community, and we want to get free. And that might mean different things for me than what it means for you, but nonetheless, I am in a journey to get free. Free from supremacy systems. Who here wants to get free from supremacy systems? All right, y'all, we're going to do an exercise here to get free. Who here is familiar with the scriptures of Harry Potter? See, I grew up, my tradition, Star Wars was a foundational aspect of my politics. My first memory is seeing a Star Wars commercial when I was 4 years old, and I wanted to see that Star Wars movie so bad, and then next thing I knew, I wanted to be a part of the Rebel Alliance against the Empire. And so I was like, I am looking for rebels. I am looking for the Rebel Alliance to destroy the Death Star of white supremacy that can unravel the Empire. And so I wanted to join the Rebel Alliance, and so when I started hearing people, I grew up in a right-wing Orange County, California. So I'd go out to protests, and these right-wingers would come up to me and they'd say, you pinko, commie, F-word, homophobia, you know what that word is, N-word lover, and this would just be, hanging out in Orange County, California in the 90s, and that was just like a regular thing. So I was like, oh my God, they just made a list of the Rebel Alliance people for me. I gotta find all these people. And then later I was called a Jew lover. So I was like, I gotta find the Jews. I gotta find the N-word people and people who love them. I gotta find the F-word people and people who love them. I gotta find the pinkos. I gotta find the commies. And this is the Rebel Alliance. And so I joined the Rebel Alliance. Are you part of the Rebel Alliance? Okay, so as part of that tradition, Harry Potter, there's a right-wing army led by Voldemort who's trying to impose pure blood superiority. So biological differences amongst people turned into political categories to organize structural power. So different kinds of biological aspects of who people are organized to create and maintain supremacy powers and divide people according to their biological differences, which have no necessary meaning other than interesting historical family stories, but are now turned into political categories to organize power. So Voldemort is trying to impose pure blood superiority within the wizarding world. You got Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and a whole team of the working class Weasleys heroes. So you got the whole crew working against Voldemort and the Dementors. And so as a young person, I realized there was the Voldemort principle of oppression. So at first I was like, I am against all these systems of oppression. I am against capitalism. I'm against these corporations. I'm against this war that the president's launching. And then over time, I had this really confident walk too, because I was like, we are on the right side of history. We are radicals. We are revolutionaries. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, wait, I've got white supremacy in my head? Because we know, not to ruin the scriptures of Harry Potter, but we know eventually that Voldemort is not just out there, but Voldemort's also in here. So I was like, oh my gosh, wait a second. I got white supremacy in my head. And oh my, I've got male supremacy in my head. And oh my gosh, I've got transphobia in my head. And I've got all these things in my head. And now I don't even know how to look up. I'm not even sure which direction I'm supposed to go in. And all I know is that I might be a damaging force to all the people I love because I have so internalized the logic of this system. Has anyone felt that? I have internalized the logic of self-hatred as an amazing, beautiful, proud black liberation leader, but these supremacy systems are working overtime to tell me that my leadership is unworthy. These supremacy systems are working overtime on all of us. Are you with me? You feel those. Supremacy systems telling us that we are not good enough. So, in the scriptures of Harry Potter, there's a spell, which whether you've read them or not, we can do this spell together. It's called Expecto Patronum. And Expecto Patronum says, we must connect to the power of a liberating love. We must connect to a source, a memory, a relationship like sandpaper that moves us in the direction of revolutionary love. Think for a moment about a relationship, an experience, a campaign, an organization that nourishes your heart and your soul to feel the power of revolutionary love against these supremacy systems, against all that pushes us down. Liberatory love that encourages and enrages and brings us forward into this work. Do you have that memory? Do you have that experience? Do you have that relationship? There's probably people in this room who can look to each other and say, you are that relationship to me. You are that leader to me. And we're going to do something silly because sometimes the ridiculous opens up the possibility for the serious. Sometimes you got to laugh and be playful so that you can engage in the pain, so that you can engage in the trauma. And so we're going to cast a spell, Expecto Patronum. And on the count of 3, we will say Expecto Patronum as a group to cast forward revolutionary love, to cast forward the memories, the historical experiences. Because supremacy systems over and over and over again want us to only know that supremacy systems are all powerful and to block the possibilities for our own imagination to believe we can win. You feel that? The supremacy systems do not want us to know that our people have won before. They do not want us to know that our people are winning right now. They do not want us to know that their capacity to win is within this room and within our congregations. They do not want us to remember the history of enslaved Africans refusing their place in history, refusing their place within structural supremacy, and refusing to stay enslaved, which opened up the possibility for an underground railroad of free black and white anti-racists, which opened up the possibility for abolitionists, free black and white, to encounter the humanity of enslaved Africans. Enslaved Africans are at the heart of the anti-slavery movement in this country that transformed a slave society that was thought to be inevitable, that was thought to be never-ending. Enslaved Africans refused their place within this structural supremacy and believed in their capacity to win when nothing was telling them they could win. When everything was saying that you are not even human. We must channel the capacity of love of our people, of our ancestors, who believed they could win in the face of everything, who continued even if they didn't think they could win, but knew they had to fight back anyway. I felt the fear of raising my voice in white spaces in front of my racist grandfather, who I love. I love my racist grandfather, and I imagine him here with me. And even though we would still disagree, I always told him, yes, I want to defeat you politically, but I will love you unconditionally. So we're going to get ridiculous so we can get serious. And we're going to cast a spell, Expecto Patronum. So connect to your deep feeling of possibility of revolutionary love. And on the count of 3, Expecto Patronum. One, 2, 3. Expecto Patronum! Thank you all so much.